The moment I stepped through the front door, my heart sank. There stood Edna, my mother-in-law, with her suitcases packed and a smug look on her face. I knew this day would come, but I never expected it to be so soon. "Naomi, your worthless existence is over. Neil doesn't need a useless wife who claims to work. From now on, I'll take care of my son," Edna declared, her voice dripping with disdain. I felt the anger rising within me. "This is my home too, and I work hard every day, Edna. You can't just—" She cut me off, thrusting a stack of papers into my hands. "Don't lie. Sign these papers and leave while I make this place worthy of my family." My eyes widened as I realized what I was holding. Divorce papers, supposedly signed by Neil. The betrayal stung like 1,000 needles, piercing my heart. How could he do this to me after all these years? I looked up at Edna, her eyes gleaming with triumph. She had always resented me, viewing me as an obstacle to her son's success. Now she had finally found a way to get rid of me. But I refused to let her see me crumble. With a steady hand, I signed the papers, my signature a declaration of my resolve. I would not let this defeat me. I would start anew, free from the toxicity that had plagued my life for far too long. As I gathered my belongings, memories of happier times flooded my mind. Neil and I had once been so in love, supporting each other's dreams and ambitions. He had encouraged my freelance writing career, and I had been his rock as he pursued his own passions. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. Neil's writing career stagnated, and he began to indulge his parents' delusions of grandeur. The loving husband I once knew had become a stranger, a mere puppet in his family's twisted play. I pushed the memories aside, focusing on the present. I had to find a new place to live, to rebuild my life on my own terms. It wouldn't be easy, but I knew I had the strength within me to overcome this challenge. As I stepped out of the house, I caught a glimpse of Edna's smug smile. She thought she had won, but little did she know that this was just the beginning of my journey. I would prove to her, to Neil, and to myself that I was more than just a useless wife. With each step, I felt a newfound sense of purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it head-on. I had spent too many years living in the shadows of others' expectations. Now, it was time for me to reclaim my life and find the happiness I deserved. As I walked away from the house that had once been my home, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. But I knew that this was not the end, but rather the start of a new chapter. A chapter where I would be the author of my own story, free from the chains of the past. With a deep breath, I stepped into the unknown, ready to embrace the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead. This was my time to shine, and nothing, not even Edna's cruelty or Neil's betrayal, could stop me now. As I settled into the driver's seat of my car, the weight of the past few hours crashed down on me. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white as I fought back the tears that threatened to spill. How had it come to this? How had the love Neil and I once shared turned into such a bitter, twisted mess? Memories of our early days together flooded my mind. I remembered the way Neil's eyes sparkled when he talked about his writing, the passion in his voice as he shared his dreams with me. I had been his biggest supporter, encouraging him to pursue his craft while I worked tirelessly to build my own freelance career. We had been a team, a partnership built on love and mutual respect. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. Neil's writing career had stagnated, and he had become increasingly distant, spending more and more time trying to please his parents. I had tried to be understanding, to be supportive, but Edna's constant meddling and Neil's growing resentment had taken their toll. The once loving husband I knew had become a stranger, a shell of the man I had fallen in love with. As I drove through the familiar streets of our neighborhood, I couldn't help but wonder what had gone wrong. Had I not been enough? Had I not loved him enough, supported him enough? But deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't about me. It was about Neil's inability to stand up to his parents, to assert himself, and fight for our marriage. He had chosen to indulge their delusions, to prioritize their expectations over our relationship. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had to move on, to find a new place to live and start over. I couldn't continue to live in a house where I was constantly belittled and undermined, where my own husband had betrayed me so deeply. I pulled into the parking lot of a local coffee shop, needing a moment to gather my thoughts. As I sat there, sipping on a steaming cup of coffee, I felt a newfound sense of determination wash over me. I would not let this defeat me. I would rise above the pain and the betrayal, and I would build a new life for myself. I pulled out my phone and started searching for apartments in the area. It wouldn't be easy, starting over at my age, but I knew I had the strength within me to do it. I had spent too many years living in the shadows of others' expectations. It was time for me to step into the light and reclaim my life. As I scrolled through the listings, a sense of excitement began to build within me. This was my chance to start fresh, to create a home that was truly my own. A place where I could be myself, free from the constant judgment and criticism of my in-laws. I knew there would be challenges ahead. I would have to face the reality of Neil's betrayal and the disdain of his family. But I was ready. I had spent too many years silently enduring their abuse, and I refused to do it any longer. With a newfound sense of purpose, I finished my coffee and headed back to the car. I had a lot of work ahead of me, but I was ready to face it head-on. This was my time to shine, to prove to myself and to the world that I was more than just a useless wife. As I drove away from the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I was ready to embrace the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead, to write the next chapter of my life on my own terms. The days following my departure from the house I once called home were a whirlwind of emotions. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove to myself and everyone else that I was more than just a useless wife. But even as I poured my heart and soul into my freelance projects, I couldn't escape the constant barrage of insults and passive-aggressive behavior from Edna and Neil. Every family gathering became a battlefield, with Edna taking every opportunity to publicly humiliate me. She would make snide comments about my work, my appearance, and my supposed lack of contribution to the family. Neil, ever the dutiful son, would sit silently by, never once coming to my defense. I remember one particularly painful incident at a family dinner. Edna had invited everyone over to celebrate Neil's supposed writing success, and I had reluctantly agreed to attend. As we sat around the table, Edna began to regale the family with tales of Neil's literary prowess, painting him as a rising star in the publishing world. I knew it was all a lie, but I bit my tongue, not wanting to cause a scene. But Edna wasn't content to simply praise her son. She turned to me, a cruel smile playing on her lips, and said, "And what about you, Naomi? What have you accomplished lately? Still playing at being a writer?" The table fell silent, and I felt all eyes on me. I wanted to scream, to tell them all the truth about Neil's failures and Edna's manipulation, but I remained stoically silent, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I excused myself from the table and stepped outside, taking deep breaths to calm my racing heart. It was in that moment that I realized I couldn't continue to live this way. I had to leave, to find a way out of this toxic environment before it destroyed me completely. Later that evening, I found myself confiding in my daughter, Clara. She had always been my rock, my confidante, and I knew I could trust her with my deepest fears and doubts. As we sat together on the couch, I poured out my heart to her, telling her about the constant insults, the passive-aggressive behavior, and the suffocating control Edna had over our lives. Clara listened patiently, her eyes filled with concern and love. When I finished, she took my hand in hers and said, "Mom, you deserve so much better than this. You are a strong, talented, and amazing woman, and you don't need to put up with their abuse any longer." Her words hit me like a lightning bolt, and I felt a sudden surge of clarity wash over me. She was right. I had spent too many years silently enduring their mistreatment, and it was time for me to take a stand. I had to value myself, to recognize my own worth, and to prepare for a life without Neil and his toxic family. With Clara's encouragement ringing in my ears, I began to make plans. I started secretly searching for apartments, determined to find a place where I could start fresh and rebuild my life on my own terms. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face the challenges head-on. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. I knew that leaving Neil and his family would be painful, but I also knew that it was necessary. I had to prioritize my own well-being, to reclaim the respect and autonomy that had been stripped away from me for so long. With a newfound sense of purpose, I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep, dreaming of a future where I was free from the chains of my past, ready to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. With newfound determination, I began to put my plan into action. I started covertly searching for apartments, scouring online listings, and making discreet calls to potential landlords. I knew I had to be careful, as any hint of my intentions would surely be met with swift retribution from Edna and Neil. As I searched, I also began to discreetly pack my belongings. I started with small, inconspicuous items. A few books here, a piece of jewelry there. I tucked them away in hidden corners of the house, slowly building a secret stash of my most treasured possessions. But even as I worked towards my escape, the tension at home continued to escalate. Neil, ever the dutiful son, seemed to be under increasing pressure from his parents to maintain the illusion of his success. He began to siphon money from our joint accounts, claiming it was for shared expenses, but I knew better. I remember one particularly heated argument we had over finances. I had confronted him about the missing money, demanding to know where it had gone. He had the audacity to look me in the eye and lie, claiming it was for a business investment that would pay off tenfold. I saw right through his deceit, and I felt a surge of anger course through my veins. How dare he continue to manipulate and deceive me, even as I was planning my escape from this toxic environment? But I refused to let my anger consume me. Instead, I channeled it into a quiet, steely resolve. I would not let Neil or his family break me. I would regain the respect and autonomy that had been stripped away from me, no matter the cost. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to search for my new home in secret. I attended apartment viewings under the guise of running errands, always careful to cover my tracks. I knew that if Edna or Neil caught wind of my plans, they would stop at nothing to keep me under their control. Finally, after weeks of searching, I found the perfect place. It was a small, cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood, far from the suffocating influence of my in-laws. I signed the lease with a sense of triumph, knowing that I was one step closer to my freedom. But even as I celebrated this small victory, I knew that the hardest part was yet to come. I had to find a way to leave without triggering a prolonged fight with Edna and Neil. I knew they would not let me go easily, and I had to be strategic in my departure. That's when fate seemed to intervene. Edna, in her never-ending quest to control every aspect of our lives, began to pressure me to sign the divorce papers once again. She cornered me one evening, thrusting the papers in my face and demanding that I end this farce of a marriage once and for all. In that moment, I saw my opportunity. I agreed to sign the papers, but on one condition, that I be allowed to leave immediately, without any further interference from her or Neil. Edna, so eager to be rid of me, readily agreed. And so, with a sense of both relief and trepidation, I signed my name on the dotted line. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, knowing that I was finally free from the legal bonds that had tied me to Neil and his family for so long. But even as I celebrated this small victory, I knew that the real challenge lay ahead. I had to gather my belongings and make my escape before Edna or Neil could change their minds. I had to be strong, to rely on the quiet strength that had sustained me through all these years of silent battles. With a deep breath, I began to pack my bags, ready to embark on the next chapter of my life. A chapter filled with uncertainty, yes, but also with the promise of a brighter future, free from the chains of my past. The day I moved into my new apartment was a day I will never forget. As I stepped over the threshold, a wave of relief washed over me, so powerful that it nearly brought me to my knees. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again, like the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. I took a moment to simply stand there, taking in my new surroundings. The apartment was small, but it was mine. Every inch of it represented a new beginning, a chance to start over and rebuild my life on my own terms. As I began to unpack my belongings, I felt a newfound burst of creativity coursing through my veins. Ideas for new writing projects flooded my mind, and I found myself itching to sit down at my desk and put pen to paper. It was as if the act of leaving behind the toxic environment of my old life had unlocked something within me, something that had been dormant for far too long. Over the next few days, I threw myself into my work with a passion I hadn't felt in years. I wrote for hours on end, pouring my heart and soul into every word. I took breaks only to eat, sleep, and occasionally chat with my new neighbor, Grace, who had quickly become a source of support and friendship. Grace was a kind, empathetic woman who seemed to understand the struggles I was going through without me even having to say a word. She would often invite me over for tea and conversation, and I found myself opening up to her in ways I never had with anyone before. As I settled into my new life, I began to rediscover the joy of living independently. I relished the freedom to make my own choices, to come and go as I pleased without fear of judgment or criticism. I took long walks in the park, explored new cafes and bookstores, and even started attending a weekly writing group at the local library. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly living, rather than simply existing. I was no longer defined by my role as Neil's wife or Edna's punching bag. I was Naomi, a strong, capable woman with a bright future ahead of her. But even as I reveled in my newfound independence, I couldn't shake the feeling that the other shoe was about to drop. I had spent so many years living under the oppressive thumb of my in-laws that a part of me was still waiting for them to come barging back into my life, demanding that I return to my old ways. And then, 3 days into my fresh start, the phone rang. I picked it up, expecting it to be Clara, or perhaps a new client. But the voice on the other end of the line made my blood run cold. It was Neil, and he was in a panic. He spoke rapidly, his words tumbling over each other in a frantic jumble. From what I could gather, his family was in the midst of a financial crisis, and the carefully crafted facade of his success had come crashing down around them. I listened in stunned silence as he begged me to come back, to help him pick up the pieces of the life he had so carelessly shattered. But even as a part of me ached for the man I had once loved, I knew that I could never go back to that life. I had worked too hard, come too far, to let myself be dragged back into the darkness. With a heavy heart, I told Neil that I couldn't help him, that he needed to face the consequences of his actions on his own. And then, with a sense of finality, I hung up the phone, severing the last tie to my old life. As I sat there in the silence of my new apartment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but I also knew that I had the strength within me to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I was ready to embrace my new life, to chase my dreams, and build a future filled with love, laughter, and endless possibility. The days following Neil's frantic phone call were a whirlwind of emotions. I tried to focus on my work, to lose myself in the joy of writing and the comfort of my new life, but his words kept echoing in my mind, refusing to be silenced. It wasn't until a week later that I learned the full extent of the crisis that had befallen my former family. Grace, my ever-vigilant neighbor, had heard through the grapevine that Neil's parents had lost everything. They had quit their jobs, believing in the fiction of their son's success, and now found themselves destitute and desperate. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for them, despite all the pain they had caused me over the years. To have your entire world come crashing down around you, to realize that the life you had built was nothing more than a house of cards. I couldn't imagine the devastation they must have felt. But even as I grappled with these conflicting emotions, the phone calls from Neil continued. Each time, his voice grew more desperate, more unhinged. He begged me to come back, to help him pick up the pieces of the life he had so carelessly shattered. "Naomi, they think I'm a successful writer," he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. "They won't stop until you come back." I felt my resolve wavering, the old habits of a lifetime threatening to pull me back into the darkness. But then I remembered all the pain and humiliation I had endured at the hands of Neil and his family, all the years I had spent silently suffering under their oppressive rule. "I won't be part of your lies anymore," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "You need to face the consequences of your actions." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, broken only by the sound of Neil's ragged breathing. And then, with a click, the call disconnected, leaving me alone with my thoughts once more. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. I wrote like a woman possessed, pouring all of my pain and anger and hope onto the page. I attended writing workshops and networking events, determined to build a new life for myself, one that was entirely my own. And slowly but surely, I began to heal. The wounds of the past would always be with me, but they no longer defined me. I was no longer Naomi the victim, Naomi the punching bag. I was Naomi the survivor, Naomi the thriver. But even as I embraced this new chapter of my life, I couldn't help but wonder about Neil and his family. What had become of them in the wake of their own destruction? Had they found a way to pick up the pieces, to start anew? It wasn't until months later that I learned the truth. Grace, ever the gossip, had heard through a friend of a friend that Neil and his parents had moved into a small, run-down apartment on the outskirts of town. They were barely scraping by, their once proud lives reduced to a shambles. I felt a strange sense of vindication at the news, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. But even as I reveled in this small victory, I knew that I could never truly take pleasure in their downfall. For me, the true revenge was in living well, in building a life that was entirely my own. And so, with a sense of peace and purpose, I cut off all ties to my old life, embracing the freedom and independence that I had fought so hard to achieve. As I sat at my desk, surrounded by the trappings of my new life, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over me. I had confronted the demons of my past and emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. And now, with the world at my feet and the future stretching out before me, I knew that anything was possible. As the months passed, I settled into my new life with a sense of peace and contentment that I hadn't felt in years. My writing flourished, and I found myself surrounded by a growing circle of friends and colleagues who appreciated me for who I was, rather than what I could do for them. But even as I reveled in my newfound freedom, I couldn't help but wonder about Neil and his family. What had become of them in the wake of their own destruction? Had they found a way to rebuild their lives, or were they still struggling to pick up the pieces? It wasn't until I ran into Grace at the local market that I finally got some answers. She pulled me aside, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "You'll never guess what I heard," she whispered conspiratorially. "Apparently, Neil and his parents have moved into a tiny apartment on the other side of town. They're barely scraping by, and the whole neighborhood is talking about it." I felt a strange sense of vindication wash over me, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. But even as I processed this news, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for them. "I heard that Edna and Tom are constantly fighting," Grace continued, her voice lowering even further. "And Neil, well, let's just say he's not handling the pressure very well." I nodded, unsurprised by this revelation. Neil had always been weak-willed, easily swayed by the opinions of others. It was no wonder that he was struggling to cope with the weight of his own lies. Over the next few weeks, I found myself thinking more and more about my former family. I couldn't help but wonder what they were going through, how they were coping with the reality of their own downfall. But even as I grappled with these conflicting emotions, I knew that I couldn't let myself get pulled back into their toxic orbit. I had worked too hard, come too far to let them drag me back down into the darkness. And so, with a sense of resolve, I made a conscious decision to focus on my own future, to pour all of my energy into building the life that I had always dreamed of. I threw myself into my writing, attending workshops and conferences, networking with other professionals in my field. Slowly but surely, my hard work began to pay off. My freelance business took off, and I found myself inundated with new clients and projects. I even started to gain recognition in my field, with my work being featured in prominent publications and online forums. But even as I celebrated these successes, I never lost sight of the lessons I had learned from my past. I knew that true happiness and fulfillment came not from external validation, but from a deep sense of self-worth and purpose. And so I continued to focus on my own growth and development, both personally and professionally. I traveled, explored new hobbies and interests, and surrounded myself with people who lifted me up and supported my dreams. As the years passed, I found myself looking back on my journey with a sense of pride and accomplishment. I had faced some of the darkest moments of my life, but I had emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. And while I knew that I would never forget the pain and betrayal of my past, I also knew that I had found a way to move forward, to build a life that was entirely my own. In the end, that was the true vindication, not in seeing Neil and his family suffer, but in knowing that I had triumphed over adversity, that I had found the strength and courage to create a future filled with love, laughter, and endless possibility. And as I looked out over the horizon, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same resilience and determination that had brought me this far. For I was Naomi, a survivor, a thriver, and nothing could stop me now. As the years passed, I found myself reflecting more and more on the journey that had brought me to this point. It had been a long and difficult road, filled with pain and heartache, but also with moments of incredible joy and self-discovery. I thought back to those early days when I had first met Neil and fallen head over heels in love. We had been so young then, so full of hope and promise. I had truly believed that we would spend the rest of our lives together, building a future filled with love and laughter. But life had a way of throwing curveballs, and our marriage had slowly crumbled under the weight of Neil's lies and his family's toxic influence. I had spent years silently enduring their abuse, convinced that I was somehow to blame for their behavior. It wasn't until I found the strength to leave, to strike out on my own and build a new life, that I realized just how much I had been holding myself back. Freed from the chains of my past, I had flourished in ways I never thought possible. My writing career had taken off, and I found myself in demand as a freelance editor and consultant. I traveled the world, exploring new cultures and immersing myself in the beauty and diversity of life. But even as I celebrated these successes, I never lost sight of what truly mattered. My daughter, Clara, remained my rock, my constant source of love and support. And as she built her own family, I found myself cherishing every moment I could spend with her and my grandchildren. It was during one of these visits that I found myself reflecting on the true meaning of resilience. Clara and I were sitting in her backyard, watching her children play on the grass. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. "You know, Mom," Clara said softly, turning to me with a smile, "I've been thinking a lot about everything you've been through, and I just wanted to say how proud I am of you." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, and I reached out to take her hand in mine. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I couldn't have done it without you. You've been my strength, my guiding light through all of this." Clara squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with love and admiration. "You give me too much credit," she said with a laugh. "You're the one who had the courage to leave, to start over and build a new life. That takes a special kind of strength, Mom. A strength that I hope I can pass on to my own children." I nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell in my chest. Clara was right. I had faced some of the darkest moments of my life, but I had emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. And that was a legacy worth passing on, a gift that I could give to my grandchildren and all the generations to come. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But I also knew that I had the strength within me to face them head-on, to keep moving forward no matter what life threw my way. And so as I sat there in the twilight, surrounded by the love and laughter of my family, I made a silent promise to myself. I would continue to live my life with resilience and self-worth, cherishing my autonomy and independence. I would be a role model for my grandchildren, showing them that it was never too late to start over, to build a life filled with purpose and meaning. For I was Naomi, a survivor, a thriver, and nothing could stop me now. I had conquered the trials of my past, and I was ready to embrace a future filled with endless possibility, anchored by the unshakable strength of my own resilience.
My relationship with my husband isn't going well. At the same time, my father fell ill and my mother faced financial difficulties. To support my mother, I had arranged a monthly stipend of $1,000, and my husband had been transferring the money to her bank account. I was having a conversation with my mother.
Thanks for the monthly allowance. Even $30 a month is a big help.
Huh? I transfer $1,000 every month.
Huh?
The conversation with my mother didn't line up at all. A suspicion arose, so I switched to handing over the stipend. Then my husband started to panic greatly. I'm Marina, and I'm 32 years old. I'm a nurse caring for many patients daily. I'm in my 3rd year of marriage with my husband Connor, who is 1 year older than me. Unfortunately, we don't have any children yet. We met at a friend's party. Unlike me, who is shy and not good at talking, Connor had a cheerful and friendly personality. He was the type to easily become friends with anyone, regardless of gender, so he was quite popular. We bonded over our shared interest in foreign dramas, leading to a close relationship and eventually marriage. Our courtship went smoothly, and we decided to get married without any hitches. Both sets of parents blessed our marriage. I thought we would have a happy married life together. But reality didn't go so smoothly. Connor was a contract employee, and his income was only about half of mine. Still, I didn't worry much about it at the beginning of our marriage. I hoped he would eventually become a full-time employee. I have another complaint about Connor. That is, he leaves all the housework to me. When I come home, he's lying on the sofa playing mobile games. It's frustrating dealing with him like this. When I'm around, he makes me do all the household chores, leaving even his dirty dishes lying around. He leaves clothes lying around and doesn't bother with ironing. If this continues, the burden on me will be too great. As an ER nurse, I have many night shifts. Dealing with difficult patients, sometimes I can't go home for days due to emergencies. In such situations, I need Connor to take on the chores, but he wears a grim expression. Just asking him to help leads to complaints. Seems he believes housework is the wife's duty.
Why do I have to work? Even though I got married and have a wife, it's not right that I still have to do household chores, is it?
I naturally argued against this as well. Seriously, what decade are we talking about? Saying housework is the wife's job is so outdated. We both work, so it's only natural to work together, right?
What's with that attitude? Don't you want to support me when I'm tired from work? You really are not a pretty woman. I regret getting married.
Huh? What's with that tone? You never even noticed when I'm tired from work. How dare you blame others? Connor's sarcastic remarks got to me, and I started responding back, leading to more arguments between us. He really doesn't try to do housework himself. When I'm not home, instant cup noodles and food containers are left on the table. He could at least throw away the empty containers into the trash. I lost my temper and scolded Connor. Hey, could you at least throw away what you've eaten into the trash? Stop leaving everything for me to handle. However, instead of reflecting, Connor got defensive towards me.
Ugh, you're so annoying. Don't complain about something as trivial as garbage. You're so narrow-minded. I can't even relax at home, so I'm going out to have some fun.
With those words, he stormed out of the house. As our marital problems worsened, he started spending more time out late. He probably just doesn't want to face me. His attitude of avoiding confrontation only added to my frustration. Lately, even when we're together at home, we hardly speak to each other. To make matters worse, I received a call from my parents' home. Apparently, my father suddenly collapsed and had to be hospitalized. When I contacted my mother, she said,
"Don't worry about us. Well, we still have some savings. It might be tough for a while, but we'll manage by cutting back. Don't worry about us and focus on yourselves."
Even though my mother said that, I couldn't shake off my anxiety. My father was a temp staff and my mother worked part-time. It's not an easy life, and it's going to be financially tough from now on. I couldn't help but worry about my parents, both in their 60s and still not receiving pensions. During this difficult time, my husband surprisingly offered some kind words.
It seems like your family's going through a lot. Your mom has to live alone for a while, right? Must be really tough, huh?
Yeah, I'm worried about my mom. I really don't know what to do. Feeling utterly defeated, I inadvertently confided in Connor. Then he made an unexpected suggestion.
Let's send them some money. Would around $1,000 per month be okay?
Huh? Is that alright?
They've done a lot for us, you know? When in trouble, we help each other out. It would be tough if their living conditions worsen and your mom's health deteriorates, right?
I felt genuinely happy. Connor is always selfish, but when the time comes, he is always thinking of my parents. Due to work commitments, I'm too busy during the day to go to the bank to make transfers. And due to administrative reasons, I couldn't use apps or online banking temporarily. For my sake, Connor agreed to handle the transfers. I felt guilty asking Connor while he was at work, so I apologized to him. I'm sorry. I'm inconveniencing you. It's my family, so I should be the one making the transfers.
No, my company has a bank nearby, so it's not that much of a hassle. It's just a matter of going there during lunch break.
Thank you. Here's some spare cash. Use it to treat yourself to something nice to eat. I decided to give money from the $40,000 I had saved during my single days. I handed my debit card to Connor and told him the PIN. For the past 2 years, I've been sending money to my parents. Although I still have some money left, I planned to replenish it with the next bonus just to be safe. That's when my mother called from home.
Thank you for always sending money. We managed to get by because of it.
Mom, you don't have to thank me. We're family. If anything, I'm sorry it's always a little late. To be honest, I wanted to send my mother a little more money, but we have our own expenses too. So I didn't feel like I had the right to be thanked by my mother. However, that sentimental feeling was blown away by my mother's outrageous remark.
It's fine. Even $30 a month helps.
$30? I thought I misheard for a moment. While still stunned, I hurriedly asked my mother. Huh? $30 a month? What do you mean?
Huh? Oh, what do you mean? I've been getting $30 transferred every month. Isn't that your money?
Are you kidding? I've been sending $1,000 every month. My mother and I were completely confused as our stories didn't match. After calming down, we tried to reconcile our stories. According to my mother, only $30 had been transferred every month for the past 2 years. Come to think of it, my mother always just thanked me for the remittance, but we never discussed the actual amount. My mother honestly thought it was little, but she couldn't complain since her daughter was sending money apparently. I was furious. The feeling of apologizing to my mother, the embarrassment, and the anger towards Connor all surged through me at once. It was just intuition, but there was no doubt that Connor was involved in this matter. I tried to call him to confront him, but he didn't answer. Since I had just finished my night shift, I decided to rush home and check my bank statements. And there it was, $1,000 withdrawn every month without fail. In addition, there were several withdrawals, and the $40,000 in my account was almost empty. Instead, $30 per month was being transferred to my mother's bank as if to make amends. What's going on? What did Connor do with my money? I decided to go home and look around Connor's surroundings. I entered his room and searched his desk and bookshelf. Connor is usually messy and has a habit of stuffing important things into drawers. So the drawers were a mess. Would I find anything in there? But my expectations were met. Surprising items kept coming out of the drawers, one after another. They were evidence of Connor's betrayal towards me. That guy. I'll never forgive him. I decided to take action to drag Connor down to hell. Connor looked strange when he came back that day. He was extremely restless and kept glancing at me. I realized the reason for Connor's behavior, which left me feeling annoyed. However, I suppressed those feelings and spoke to him kindly. Welcome home. You went to make the transfer today too, right? Thank you for always sending money to my parents. It really helps. Connor flinched for a moment at my words, then replied awkwardly.
Oh, well, that's no big deal. Oh, good timing. There's something I need to talk to you about.
Talk? Oh. Is it because the balance in the account is decreasing? It's been 2 years since we started the remittance. But I have $40,000 in savings, so I can still afford it. Although I knew it, I mentioned it as if it had just occurred to me. The words come out easily and naturally, perhaps from the anger of absolute revenge. I wondered if my acting was as good as that of any professional actress. I thought to myself. Connor lashed onto my words. He probably never imagined that I knew the truth.
But still, if you send $1,000 every month, it'll disappear quickly, right? Just to be safe. I thought it would be better to replenish more just in case.
Connor looked at me with expectant eyes. I smiled and gave him the answer he wanted. Understood. I'll put in more money. Please continue making the transfers. Hearing this, Connor's eyes lit up. The next month, while I was doing housework, Connor rushed up to me in a panic.
Hey, when I tried to transfer money to your parents today, there was no money in the account. You can't make the remittance.
Oh, from this month, I'll be handling over the remittance in person. That should reduce your burden, right?
Huh? Well, why would you do that? I've been making the transfers all along, haven't I? Don't mess with me.
Connor was furious. His face flushed red. It was anger at not being able to withdraw money as he pleased. I looked at him with a cold gaze. Right. It seems only $30 was being transferred every month. I wonder what the other money was used for. Connor's complexion turned pale at those words. He looked pathetic as he tried to cover it up.
What are you talking about? I've been transferring $1,000 every month.
I was appalled that Connor would lie at this stage of the game. If he was going to be like that, then I would thoroughly corner him. Who are you transferring $1,000 to? And just so you know, I know you haven't been transferring $1,000 to Mom. I heard it from the person herself.
Oh, well.
Could it be that you've been giving money to that cute Lena? She really pulled a ridiculous stunt.
Huh? How do you know about Lena?
Ignoring the astonished Connor, I threw out photos of his affair with Lena at the gentleman's club. I had actually gathered evidence of Connor's affair over the past month. I even hired a detective to conduct surveillance on Connor. The result revealed that he was involved in a relationship with a certain gentleman's club hostess. His drawers and trash cans were filled with receipts for luxury items. Of course, I never received such luxury items. It turns out my husband was using my savings to lavish gifts on another woman. When this truth came to light, I was on the brink of exploding with anger. Connor's proposal to send money to my mother was something I truly appreciated. Yet he only sent her $30 using my savings for his affair. Who could forgive such betrayal? As I glared at Connor, he awkwardly shifted his gaze around. Then he finally brazenly confessed.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to have a bit of fun. I'll break up with Lena, so please, forgive me. We're married, so our savings are like shared property, right?
Connor's audacity left me speechless. I couldn't believe how foolish the man I married was. Before I knew it, I exploded at him. There's no way I'll forgive you. That money was from my single days, so it's not shared property. You're going to pay it back in full.
Huh? That's a harsh joke. I'm apologizing, aren't I?
My words seemed to slightly irritate him as he responded. At this point, Connor appears to be taking the situation lightly. I can't help but wonder why he can remain so optimistic. Does he really think he can get away with using my savings for his affair and still be forgiven? I decided to confront him with reality. Haven't you noticed by looking around the house?
Huh? It's all neatly organized.
I'm divorcing you and leaving this house. I've packed up all my things with that intention. Please, sign this. Let's discuss the details like alimony through lawyers. I thrust the filled out divorce papers at Connor. Seeing that, he finally seemed to realize I was serious. Connor began to kneel before me, his face pale.
Oh, I'm really sorry. I never meant to hurt you, Rena. I'll never cheat again, and I'll return the money I spent. So please, don't just divorce me.
Connor desperately apologizes, but of course there's no way I could forgive him. After all, he deceived me and my mother for 2 years and then cheated. Who would believe anything a man like that says? There's no way I can trust anything you say. 2 years ago, when you suggested sending money to my mother, I was truly grateful. I never imagined you were embezzling the funds. Your actions are no different from those of a fraudster. Continuing to be married to someone like you is just impossible.
I'm really sorry. Give me another chance.
Absolutely not. Besides, the moment you started giving money to your affair partner, there was no chance for you. How much longer are you going to make a fool out of yourself? All you can do is divorce me and pay alimony. Then Connor, crying like a child, shouted,
I don't want a divorce.
A grown man acting so pitifully. Though Connor was reluctant to agree to the divorce, that wasn't my concern. Leaving him with the words, I'll consult with a lawyer about what comes next, I left the house. It took some time afterward, but through a lawyer I finally managed to divorce Connor. I demanded $60,000 from him for the embezzled savings and compensation for the affair. He borrowed money from questionable sources and paid back the full amount. Now, he's quit his contract job and apparently been taken somewhere by debt collectors. He seems to be working in the harsh fishing industry somewhere up the Atlantic. Moreover, Connor has been disowned by his parents, who are angry about the affair. Even if he finishes repaying the debt, he'll have nowhere to go back to. It's a miserable fate, but I don't feel sorry for him at all. I hope he sincerely reflects on his own actions. I also demanded $15,000 in compensation from his affair partner, Lena. She borrowed money and paid it back as well. It seems Lena lost her job at the club where she worked due to her involvement with clients. Now she's been chased by debt collectors every day. I, on the other hand, have returned to my parents' home and I'm living a peaceful life. My mother also seems relieved now that I've returned. Gradually, my father's condition is stabilizing, and my mother also seems pleased. For the time being, it looks like I can slowly repay my parents' kindness. If I were to remarry next time, I would want to be married to a caring man.
Actually, my mom just collapsed. I have to accompany her, so we'll just have to call off the ceremony. On the morning of our wedding day, my boyfriend Henry called to tell me that his mother had fallen ill. What kind of condition is mother in? She suddenly collapsed and she's unconscious. Harper, can you please contact the venue to cancel? I'm on my way, so let me know which hospital. Well then, the ambulance is on its way. Henry hung up on me before he could tell me about the hospital to which his mother was being transported. I sent a message asking him to let me know, but he has not responded. It was so sudden that I didn't know where to start, and I thought about many things. Should I contact the venue first and cancel? But if his mother's life is in danger, I have to head there immediately. As I froze, clutching my phone, it rang again. I heard the person on the other end of the line and got confused. Judy? My name is Harper, and I'm a 28-year-old office worker. I have a boyfriend that I have been dating since high school. His name was Henry, a bright and gentle guy who I felt at home with and had always dreamed of marrying. We have been together for almost 10 years now. For about a year, I had been talking to Henry about getting married on our 10-year anniversary. And yet, Henry kept saying, "Yes, I will think about it." And all I get is a lukewarm reply. He has not been very forthcoming with me about getting married. We originally planned to live together after college, but
If I live with you, I'm afraid I'm going to get spoiled and sloppy. So can you wait a bit until I'm on my own first?
I was told that and got refused to live with him. At the time, I was convinced by Henry's argument, but looking back, it is an excuse that I don't really understand. It is indeed unsettling that we have been together for almost 10 years and he's still unsure about marriage. Once we decided to have a serious discussion, I called Henry to my house for the holidays. I've been saying for a while now that I want to get married.
Uh-huh. Of course I'm thinking about it too.
Can you just say it aloud and not just think?
Well,
That is, if you don't intend to get married, break it off. If you intend to get married, decide here and now. He gave a small nod when I said this much and proposed. To be honest, I had dreamed of a romantic proposal, but since it's Henry, who is a bit of a wimp, I gave up on the idea. We finally decided to get married, and things progressed a lot from there. First, we went to his parents to report our marriage. I am quite close with them, having known them since high school. My parents moved overseas after I graduated from high school, so my in-laws felt responsible for taking care of me. My in-laws were happy that I finally came to report our marriage. I called my parents to inform them too. From then on, everything went smoothly, from the meeting dinner with both families to the purchase of the rings and the search for the wedding venue. My mother-in-law worked in the bridal industry, so with her advice, we were able to quickly decide on the wedding venue. We also planned to invite our relatives and a few friends and co-workers to the reception. I was very happy, but Henry seems to dwell on it more and more. We had been talking about marriage for some time, but I thought he was anxious because I had suddenly suggested it. Henry, are you okay?
What?
You keep looking down and thinking about something. Anxious to get married?
Oh, it's not like that. Just a little.
What's wrong? If you have a problem, I'm here to listen.
No, it's about work. It's okay.
No matter how many times I asked, Henry would not tell me what was bothering him. I had heard that men can have marriage blues too, so I thought he might have had that. To reduce Henry's workload as much as possible, I took over the wedding preparation so that he would have more time for himself. Finally, it's the morning of the wedding day. Henry was scheduled to bring his parents to the ceremony. As I was getting ready to leave, my phone rang. I looked at the screen and saw that it was an incoming call from Henry. What's wrong?
Still home, right?
Yes, I was just getting ready to leave.
Actually, my mom just collapsed suddenly.
What? Your mother? Is she okay?
I'm waiting for an ambulance right now. I have to chaperone, so we'll just have to call off the ceremony.
What kind of condition is mother in?
She suddenly collapsed and she's unconscious. I'm sorry, Harper, but could you please call the venue to cancel?
I'm on my way, so let me know which hospital.
Well then, the ambulance is coming now.
Henry hung up on me before he could tell me about the hospital to which his mother was being transported. I sent an email to him asking him to let me know about the hospital, but he has not responded. It was so sudden that I didn't know where to start, and I thought about many things. If the wedding is getting cancelled, should I contact the venue first? But if his mother's life is in danger, I have to head there immediately. As I froze clutching my phone, it rang again. It was so startled that I almost dropped my phone, caught it, and rushed to answer the call. Good morning, Harper. Did you sleep well last night? It's time to head to the ceremony, and I'll help you change your dress. I heard his mother's voice, which was the same as usual, which made me confused. Judy? Yeah, it's me. Oh, are you still sleepy? I was in a rush to answer the phone and hadn't looked at the screen, but when I did, I saw that the call was from Henry's mother. When Henry said his mother fell down and had to be transported, what was that about? As I was thinking about it for a moment, when I heard Henry's voice in the background.
Oh, Mom, so you are here. You know, about the ceremony. Are you on the phone with someone right now?
I'm on the phone with Harper.
What? On the phone with Harper? Wait, Mom, give me the phone.
With that, Henry seems to forcefully take the phone from his mother.
Oh, Harper? Oh no, it's about my mother.
What the hell is going on? Are you saying that your mother having collapsed was a lie?
No, I wasn't lying. I was surprised too, but she recovered quickly. There was nothing weird. She's totally fine. So, did you cancel the ceremony?
I had no idea what the lie was for or why, but all I could tell was that he didn't want to have a wedding. You didn't have to lie like that if you didn't want to have a wedding with me.
That's not what I meant. It's not...
Can you give the phone to your mother? By the looks of it, you're lying to your parents too.
No, I will explain that properly.
Of course I will let you explain. We don't have time for this, so give it quickly. He reluctantly gave the phone to her, as if it's been decided that he couldn't get away with it. For Henry to tell me that his mother had collapsed and that they were going to the hospital, and to be asked by him to cancel the ceremony because we had no choice. I explained all these things to her. When she heard my story, "Is it true that you lied about me falling ill and tried to cancel the ceremony?" she confronted Henry. I couldn't tell over the phone, but I'm sure Henry was nodding silently. After a short pause, I heard a loud sigh from his mother. "I'm sorry. We'll do what you want us to do. What do you want to do, Harper?" "Right. I will cancel the ceremony because we are no longer in a condition to do so." "Well, I'm really sorry." I then discussed it with her and contacted the invited guests and the ceremony venue to inform them of the cancellation. It was painful to tell my parents, who came all the way from overseas. Since they still don't know the truth, I just explained to my parents that we had a miscommunication. After getting a word out, I headed to Henry's parents' house in the late afternoon. When I arrived at their house, Henry was being reprimanded by his father. Before our discussion, his parents got down on their knees and apologized to me.
"We had no idea our son was such an idiot. We are truly sorry."
I asked them to raise their heads. Henry kept looking down and made no attempt to apologize, even though his parents did so because of him. "You don't apologize?"
"Oh, I'm sorry."
"Why did you lie about your mother falling ill?"
"It is...
Keeping quiet won't solve anything though.
I could be making $30 million a year."
Not only I, but his parents were also stunned by what he said. I don't understand this at all.
"She's going to make me an employee, and for that reason, we had to cancel the ceremony."
Wait! Explain everything from the beginning. That said, Henry began to explain what he meant bit by bit. About a year after he started working, he met the daughter of the president of a major company, who was an acquaintance of his friend. The president's daughter liked Henry and said, "If you go out with me, I will put you in my father's company. His employees' annual income is $30 million. This was a great opportunity for Henry, who was not doing well at his job and was considering a career change. He said that he had been dating the president's daughter, while dating me without thinking too much about it. This means that they have been having an affair for about 5 years. I checked Henry's phone on the spot when I heard about the affair. Then I found many photos of his dates with a beautiful woman. They were pictures of beautiful scenic hotels and beaches, and they seemed to have fun.
I went out with her like she told me to, but she wouldn't let me into their company for a while. You were pressuring me to get married, and I didn't know what to do.
You should have left me and go to the boss's daughter, right?
I don't want to. She's selfish and egotistical. If I were to marry, I would prefer you. So the plan was to leave as soon as they let me into the company and marry you.
I don't understand. The wedding was cancelled, but you already submitted the marriage certificate.
About that, I haven't actually submitted it.
What's that? What do you mean? Since we were on a tight schedule from the time we decided to get married until the ceremony, Henry took care of the marriage license, and I was making preparations. Henry told me that he had submitted the marriage certificate without having really sent it in. I can't believe he lied to me all those years ago, and even lied about getting married. I could only sigh in dismay.
Because I could have made $30 million a year. With that much, you could be a stay-at-home mom, and the money would be nice to have too.
I don't want to be a housewife, and there is no way he could get $30 million in the first place. I'm sure that the president's daughter is playing with Henry, who doesn't know things just for fun. I'd rather have a man who doesn't cheat on me than a man who makes a lot of money. Henry's eyes widened when I said this. Then his face turned grim.
That's enough. I've been working hard for you.
Huh? For me? What do you mean by working hard? You just enjoyed cheating.
Yes. You narrow-minded person wouldn't know what I'm going through. Because I'm going to tie the knot with her and make $30 million a year. You can't come back to me just because I have money.
I will never go back to a guy like you. I told him that and left their house. His parents kept their heads down until the very end. I don't really care about anything else anymore. But I was disappointed that I could no longer be a family with his wonderful parents. 10 days later, I received a phone call from Henry. I realized that I had forgotten to reject the call because I didn't want to think about him. However, curious as to what the call was about, I picked up the phone. The caller, Henry, was whimpering and crying and started talking about how he had been dumped by the president's daughter. Sure enough, he was being played with. The president's daughter has another man she is dating, and she wanted to tease Henry, who had been his girlfriend's sole focus since high school. So she lied about making him an employee who earned $30 million a year and teased him for having the affair. She said that she was satisfied that Henry and I had broken up, and she told him that everything was a lie and dumped him. The president's daughter who makes fun of people is disgusting, but I have no more love for him after he betrayed me by believing a lie that anyone could have figured out.
I'm really sorry. This time around, I realize that you are the only one for me. We've known each other for a long time, right? Let's start over again.
Last time, you said it was impossible even if I tried to come back to you.
That was just something I said because you were being hard on me.
I have absolutely no intention of getting back together with you, so don't call me again. I hung up and blocked calls from him. The wedding and the reception were cancelled on the day of the wedding, so the cancellation fee was 100%. Since Henry was the cause of the cancellation, his parents paid the cancellation fee instead. Angered by what Henry had done, they kicked him out of their house, treating the cancellation fee as a goodbye gift. Henry left his workplace at the same time we broke up. I heard him say boldly that a seat had been prepared for him as the next president of the major company he would be joining. As a result, he could not even join the company, let alone take that seat. But I'm glad he left the company. It was explained that the reason the ceremony was cancelled was because of Henry's infidelity. He will have no credibility at all in the company, because he has been caught cheating for 5 years on his girlfriend of almost 10 years. He would have eventually resigned, even if he had stayed with the company. It just would have been sooner. He had also bought a new suit, watch, and shoes, saying he wanted to dress like a rich man. Those were purchased at the high-end store introduced to him by the president's daughter, and he had to incur considerable debt just to pay for them. That is not only thing. There is also compensation for me. We were able to prove the affair after the engagement, so I was able to claim alimony from Henry. It is not that expensive, but for Henry, who has lost his job and is in debt, it is far from what he can afford. He currently lives in an $800 per month apartment and has a part-time job. He is looking for a full-time job while paying off his debts. However, it doesn't seem to work at all, perhaps because he once dreamed of a $30 million annual income. I had no intention of fighting with the president's daughter for Henry. I was disgusted with his affair partner, but I thought it would be a long process if I had to demand alimony from her as well. The lawyer I consulted also told me it would be difficult, so I gave up. But the woman was also punished. Her father found out that she had been tricking Henry by lying to him about giving him a job at her father's company. She had been receiving a monthly allowance of hundreds of thousands of dollars from her father, but that allowance is now gone. The money she had and her credit cards were all confiscated. She has now been evicted from her home and is being forced to work in a subsidiary company, which is a factory. Although it is a subsidiary, the plant manager is an old friend of the president and has known her since she was a baby. The factory manager knows what is going on, and he says he is going to set her straight, and he is being very strict with her. I heard about this from Henry's parents. It seems that the father, the president of the company, came to their house himself to apologize for the damage Henry had suffered because of his daughter's lies. At that time, Henry's parents explained to him about me and informed me that the president wanted to apologize to me as well. I heard that the woman had been properly punished, so I politely declined an apology from the president, saying that was enough. Nevertheless, the president apologized and gave me $100,000, hoping that I would accept it as a consolation payment. The atmosphere was such that he was not likely to leave until I received the money, and since I had joined his company under other circumstances, I gratefully accepted. I was thinking of changing jobs and moving at this time, so it was honestly helpful to have a sum of money available. Moving out can be a change of scenery, but another reason is also because the guy whom I've been dating for 10 years cheated on me and called off the wedding. So word spread within my former company and among acquaintances. No one was being mean, but it was a bit stressful because I often had to be careful around people. I found a new job at the new location, and I'm living a fulfilling life. I was quite shocked that Henry had betrayed me, and I had no desire to have a boyfriend at all for a while. Recently, however, I became interested in someone in the company. I thought that I could no longer trust people, but I have someone who cares about me, so I felt that I could finally move on. I'm also trying to be a little more positive about my love life.
My mother-in-law and my husband built a house on my land. When it was completed, they tried to kick me out, but
I'm done with you now that the house is finished. I want you to divorce my son.
I'm going to move in with Mom, so you can get out of here.
The moment they finished the new house, they treated me like this. I knew they were trying to take advantage of me. With a big smile on my face, I said to them, "With pleasure." A few days later, my mother-in-law and my husband came to my office, pale-faced. "What in the world is going on?" My name is Lucy. I'm a 34-year-old office worker. I currently live at home with my mother. My father died of illness a few years ago. Since then, I have been taking care of my mother. My mother has always been frail, and she has been living under the care of a caregiver since her back and legs deteriorated about 7 years ago. I have to work during the daytime on weekdays, so I have a caregiver helping her during those times. I take care of my mother during the rest of the time. It is not easy for me to balance work and caring for my mother, but it is not hard when I think about my mother's sake. I have received a lot of love from my parents. I am grateful that they sent me to college, and I have many memories with my family since they took me to many places when I was a child. I wanted to repay my parents for their kindness. That's why after my mother's back and legs got worse, I returned to my hometown to live with them. Lucy, thank you for everything, and I'm sorry for all the restrictions I put on you. What are you talking about? There are no restrictions. But you have been taking care of me for a while now, and it's not easy to meet anybody good under those conditions, isn't it? You don't have to worry about that. I'm not in a hurry. I was fooling myself by saying that. When I lived like this, I certainly didn't have nearly as many opportunities to meet people. People at work are either married or nearly 10 years older than me. None of them were available for a romantic relationship, so I wasn't blessed with any good encounters. In the midst of all this, a friend of mine took the liberty of setting up a group blind date. I thought I would not find a partner, even if I attended, but since my friend had organized it, I thought it would be rude not to go. So I decided to go to the party. And so, in the end, there were 3 men and 3 women, including myself, who attended the date. At first, everyone was talking friendly as a group. Then, as time went by, we changed seats and began to talk to those next to each other. At that time, James came up next to me and talked to me. James and I were the same age, so we had a lot in common, and I remember I had fun talking to him. I would love to fall in love with him if I could. I wish I could go on a date with him. I thought things like that while talking. However, I accidentally told him about myself. I told him that I was taking care of my mother at home. Most men would probably not be interested, or would hesitate to go out with me at that point. Moreover, I think most men would feel that marriage would be too difficult. In fact, even when my father was still alive, I had experienced rejection when they found out that my mother was under care. So I was sure that he would naturally move away from me as soon as he heard the truth. But his response was different.
I see. I know it's a lot of work. I think it's great that you are taking care of your mother.
What?
You are taking care of her all by yourself, aren't you? That's a lot of work, and I respect it.
Well, I guess. I had never been praised like that before, so I was both happy and a little embarrassed. However, he was serious in complimenting me. There was no lie in his eyes.
You know, I come from a single-parent home, so I know how hard it is to be without a father.
I see. So James, has your father already passed?
Yeah, well, in my case, my dad had an affair, and that's why my parents divorced.
Oh, I see.
Haha, you must be surprised.
Oh no.
It's okay, I don't mind. I was happy living with my mother, so it's no problem.
I see. We talked about deep things that brought us closer together. We exchanged numbers and started going on dates since then. Then, he confessed to me, and we officially became boyfriend and girlfriend. I told him, if you're considering a marriage, I have my mother's care to do, so please keep that in mind before dating me. To that, he said,
Of course. I've thought about it. I've decided after thinking about all that.
I thought he was very trustworthy, and we started dating. As we continued our relationship, he was concerned about my mother, and sometimes even offered to have dinner with me at my parents' house. He was very considerate of my situation, and my mother's needs, even though we were not yet married. I became more and more attracted to him. My mother also liked him, saying he was a kind and good person.
James, I just wanted to say thank you for keeping Lucy company. This girl was so busy taking care of me that she didn't have time to fall in love. No, I'm the one who is grateful for Lucy dating me.
I was happy to see him and my mother smiling and talking happily with each other. And so, we continued dating, and after a year, we decided to get married. I never thought I could get married, but with him accepting my mother, I thought we would definitely have a happy marriage. My mother was so happy when we had our wedding. My co-workers and my friends also congratulated me on my marriage. I thought I was going to live with him, but to my surprise, he offered to live with my mother. Are you sure about this?
Of course I am. I've been thinking about it ever since we decided to get married.
Thank you, James. I was genuinely happy. I had originally hoped that when I got married, I would be able to live near my parents' house to take care of my mother. I thought I would have to move back and forth between our place and my mother's place. But then, my husband suddenly suggested this. When I told my mother about this, she burst into tears of joy.
I'm so glad you met someone truly wonderful.
This is how our life together began. I was content to enjoy the feeling of being a newlywed with my husband, while also taking care of my mother. My husband actively helped out with things like the heavy lifting and wheelchair pushing when I needed a man's help. We were living a peaceful life together as a family. But about 2 years later, my mother's health suddenly got worse. She had been able to live with us at home as long as I took care of her, but now she needed to be hospitalized. However, since my mother was already close to 70 years old, I was a little prepared for this. I went to visit her every day. My husband also came to visit her when he finished work early.
Lucy, thank you for everything you have done for me. James, please take care of Lucy. Mom, don't say things like that. Don't talk to me like it's your last words. Yes, we need you to live longer.
Thank you. You are so kind. I had a bad feeling about this. The way my mother talked to me sounded like she was prepared too. I then explained the situation to the company. I told them that if something should happen to her, I would like to take a paid leave. I didn't want that to happen at all if possible. But my bad premonition came true. A week later, my mother's condition worsened and passed away. I was very depressed by my mother's death. My husband comforted me and calmly made arrangements and preparations for the funeral. Thanks to him, I was able to send my mother off safely. After the funeral, I was still very sad, and I felt like I had a gaping hole in my heart.
Lucy, let's live happily for your mother. Take your time and get your strength back.
Thank you. My husband was so kind and cuddled me. I healed my emotion wounds little by little over time, and regained my strength. I truly believed that I had met a kind man, but that was my big mistake. I began to feel uncomfortable with my husband. It was about 3 months after my mother passed away. When I started to regain some of my energy, my husband began to invite my mother-in-law to our house often.
Lucy, I hope you are feeling better. I know it must be hard for you, but you have to look to the future.
Thank you for your words. My mother-in-law used to say kind words to me, but I was a little troubled by her frequent visit.
Mom, you should eat dinner with us again tonight.
Sounds like a good idea. I will do that then.
My mother-in-law, as a matter of course, would have dinner with us. She often stayed over too. It was fine if it was only once in a while, but she would come 2 or 3 times a week. It was almost as if we lived together. Moreover, my mother-in-law did not pay for any of the food and other expenses incurred during these visits. My husband may have told her she didn't have to pay for it, but then I had to pay for it from our family budget. It basically meant that I was the one who was paying for it. And in the midst of all this, my husband started saying something like this.
Why don't we invite my mother to come and live with us?
What? With your mother?
Yeah, because it's a little big for just the 2 of us. You're the one who inherited it, so we can't give this place away either. I was born when my mother was young, so she's only 65. But still, anything can happen at any time. I'm just worried about her, you know. Mom said she would take care of the housework. I think if we work, and she does the housework, we can all live a happy and comfortable life.
At that time, I was convinced by my husband's words, and so I agreed to live with my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law did not bully me or anything like that. She did the housework well and was very helpful. It was nice to come home from work and find the food ready to eat. My mother-in-law was kind to me while I lived with her, and I enjoyed talking as the 3 of us over dinner. I had come to trust my mother-in-law completely. In the midst of all this, my mother-in-law and my husband suggested something surprising.
This house is getting old, so why don't we build a new house?
What?
We will live in this house for a long time, right? We may even have children. Then I think it would be better to live in a new and clean house.
I think that's a good idea. I think it is your parents' wish that you are happy and comfortable.
When my mother-in-law and husband said that to me, I felt the same way. My mother and father always wished me to be happy. As my husband and mother-in-law said, rebuilding the house and living in a new one might lead to my happiness. So I took them up on their offer. Then, my husband and I searched for a real estate agent, and we discussed the layout of the room and the other details. My mother-in-law also joined us and offered her opinion. And then we actually started construction. Until the house was completed, the 3 of us lived in a rented apartment as a temporary residence. The days passed by so quickly. We were excitedly waiting for the day the house was to be completed in about a month. But then, I overheard an unexpected conversation between my mother-in-law and my husband. It all started when I was frequently working overtime. When I went home one day after working overtime, I heard something that I couldn't believe.
Well, it looks like the plan is going to work out sooner than I thought.
Yeah, I wonder what she's going to look like when we get rid of that stupid wife. I can't wait to get your lovely girlfriend over here and have the 3 of us living together.
I really couldn't believe my ears. My husband and mother-in-law were talking as if they were having a relationship with a woman other than me. I opened and closed the front door one more time so that they would not know that I had heard their conversation.
Then, they finally noticed that I had returned. The atmosphere of the conversation they had just had between them was gone. They were back to their usual friendly manner with me. I was growing distrustful of them. But still, the rebuilding of the house had already begun, and I could not stop it. And after a while, the house was completed. We quickly moved from our temporary place to our new house. The new house was very clean and beautiful from the outside. We also saw the interior of the house. It was a beautiful, new, and very nice house. My husband and mother-in-law were very impressed and excited. Then, they turned to me and suddenly started to grin and laugh. "I'm done with you now that the house is finished. I want you to divorce my son." "What?" That's what my mother-in-law said to me out of the blue. And my husband agreed with her.
"I'm going to move in with Mom, so you can get out of here."
He said this as he pulled out the already filled out divorce papers. The moment they finished the new house, they treated me like this. I knew they were trying to take advantage of me. With a big smile on my face, I said to them, "With pleasure." I immediately took the divorce papers. My mother-in-law and husband were surprised that I had backed down so quietly. They seemed to think that I had given up.
"I'm glad you were fooled so easily. I've been waiting for this moment since the first time I talked to you at the blind group date. You were already living alone with your mother, who already needed care at the time. I had a flash of inspiration that it would be perfect if Mom and I moved into the house you inherit and rebuilt it. I'm a genius, right?"
I was utterly dumbfounded. They had been planning this for years. I was stunned to the point of amazement. My mother-in-law praised her son. "He really is the best son anyone could have. Now I can live comfortably in my old age." They grinned at each other. But my husband and mother-in-law don't know yet. I had already made the first move. I took my luggage and left the place as it was. Then, I went to a place. It is a room in an apartment. I had already rented a room in an apartment for myself, so I was going to move there from the beginning. I was sure my husband and mother-in-law will be surprised at what is going to happen to them. I thought about them and couldn't help but laugh a little. A few days later, my mother-in-law and my husband came to my office, pale-faced. I thought they might call me or something, but no. They stormed into my office out of the blue. I was surprised as this was unexpected.
"What on earth is going on? Why do we have to be evicted from that house?"
My husband and mother-in-law shouted at me like that. But I calmly replied, "The house and the land belong to me, so it's up to me to sell them, isn't it?" When I said that, the two of them were immensely upset.
"No, that's not possible. Didn't we buy that house under your joint ownership?"
"You didn't listen to anything I said. We decided to buy it in my name because you earn too little. That's why the house and the land are mine."
"Oh no!"
Finally, they seemed to understand the situation.
Lucy, we are so sorry. It's our fault. So please, we can live together again, right?" "Yeah. We are a married couple, and you don't have any relatives anymore. Let's live happily again as a family, with my mother and me."
"What are you talking about? Don't you remember when you confronted me with the divorce papers? I've already filed them. We are strangers now. And I have proof that you're having an affair too."
"What?"
"I will be filing a claim for alimony through my lawyer."
"Oh no! Wait, please!"
"I'm not waiting. This is my office. I want you to out of here." I called the security guard and asked him to send them away. Soon, my ex-husband and an ex-mother-in-law were taken outside by the security guard. I then filed a claim for alimony against my ex-husband and the affair partner through my lawyer. My ex-husband's salary is not much, but it seems like he's having a hard time because his debts are increasing. In addition, he could not get the house, so the affair partner told him that that's not what he told her, and he was dumped. My ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law are living together in a shabby apartment after that. I heard a rumor that they were kicked out of the house because they were bothering the neighbors with their daily fights. I don't know where they are now, and I'm not interested in them. I, on the other hand, live in a small rented apartment for singles, peacefully and comfortably. The house I rebuilt sold for quite a high price, and I was able to make a positive profit. I'm planning to keep the money and use it after my retirement. I'm going to put my love life on hold for a while, and going to devote myself to my work as much as I can. It's just fraudulent to think that they were planning to take over the house from the beginning. I think this ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law deserve harsher sanctions. But from Lucy's point of view, maybe it would be better to cut them off as soon as possible. At any rate, I'm glad she was able to make a profit when she sold the house. I hope a nice man will appear in front of Lucy in the future. Thank you for watching.
My mother-in-law goes on a trip with a young man, while she lets me take care of terminally ill father-in-law.
Why do I have to be the caregiver? I never want to take care of my husband toileting. Why do you think I allow you and my son to get married in the first place? It's for a time like this, isn't it? It's not like you're going to be taking care of him for years. 1 year at the most. He's going to die soon anyway, so just have patience. My mother-in-law hated taking care of my father-in-law, who was diagnosed with terminal cancer with little time left to live. The reason why she didn't want to do it was simple. It would mean less time for her to see the man she was having an affair with. As far as I know, my father-in-law is a very kind and gentle man. My mother-in-law must have spent many years with my father-in-law. So how could she do such a terrible things to such a kind person? My father-in-law saw me having such thoughts. One day, as I was taking care of him, he said to me with a smile,
Don't worry, I will take her to hell with me.
A few days later, my mother-in-law really had to go through hell. I'm an office worker and a housewife, just an ordinary person. My husband and I have been married for about 5 years, and although we are not blessed with children, we still have a good relationship. We live happily, and our married life is smooth sailing for the most part. Almost. There is one person who is putting a damper on our happy life. It's my mother-in-law. She will soon be in her 50s. I don't know what kind of magic she is using, but she looks like she is in her late 30s. Perhaps she has been pampered because of her appearance, but she has a worse personality. When we went to greet her before our wedding, she said as soon as she saw me, "Is someone like you my son's girlfriend?" She was so rude to me. Afterward, when we talked with my parents-in-law in the living room, my mother-in-law listened to my story about my past and denied everything about my life, saying that I had a boring life and that I was shabby. Indeed, I'm not particularly beautiful. I was born into an ordinary family, and I have lived a reasonably happy and ordinary life. It's not a dramatic life, but why should I be denied so much at our first meeting? My father-in-law, who was standing next to her, told her not to be rude, and my husband told her to stop it, but she wouldn't listen to them. So on the way home after the greeting, my husband apologized to me and said painfully,
I love you, but my mother has always been a person who can only deny things like that, and I don't think she will ever get over her bad habit. So, if you're disgusted with this marriage, you can reject it.
My husband, who had nervously proposed to me, said this to me. It shows a great deal of determination, and that my mother-in-law is such a problematic person. But I want to marry my husband because I want to be with him. And if I rejected the marriage because of my future mother-in-law, it would mean that I was running away from her. I didn't want to feel like I was losing. What happened after that is obvious from the fact that I have been calling my husband since the beginning. After we got married, we lived far away from my parents-in-law's house and saw them only a few times a year, mainly just at Thanksgiving and Christmas. That alone is quite mentally exhausting for me. It's fine for me to help her with the house chores. However, she starts by complaining about how I help her, then continues to denigrate my personality. And finally, she starts bragging about how superior my mother-in-law herself was. I learned from this story that my mother-in-law and father-in-law are married through an arranged marriage. I also surmised from this that my father-in-law's family was quite rich, and my mother-in-law had married him for his money. She once said something like, "If he didn't have that much money, I wouldn't have married that old man." In addition, my husband and I had been asked to move in with her, but it was unthinkable for us to live with her, so my husband and I firmly refused. However, my mother-in-law has been calling me quite often lately, probably because she has grown tired of my attitude, and she even yells at me, asking me when in the world I'm going to move in with her. But I can see that if I live with her, I will be mistreated as a daughter-in-law and treated like a servant. In fact, she started saying something like, "The quality of house chores has been declining lately because of that old man. If this continues, my house will become a dump. I wish I had someone to take his place." To begin with, this mother-in-law is so bossy that she has her husband do all the house chores. When we meet at my parents-in-law's house, she talks about her philosophy of what a wife should be and denies me. When my husband and I stubbornly refused to live with her, she finally started threatening us. First, she called me on the phone. "Are you going to let me just die?" Then, she started spreading bad news about us to the neighbors. Finally, she sent an email to the company where I work saying, "Your employee is the worst kind of bitches who disrespect the lives of the elderly." Fortunately, the company handled it as just spam mail, but since I did not know what my mother-in-law would do in the future, I talked to my husband and agreed to move in with her. Once we started living together, I was in charge of all the household chores that my father-in-law had been doing. And as expected, my mother-in-law was very hard on me. "What's the matter with you? You're born into a boring family. You've lived a crappy life. You're born to be such a servant, and you can't even do a single household chore. No, I've never seen anyone with so little talent. How did you manage to marry my son? Maybe you're so good in bed. That's disgusting." If she's going that far, why doesn't she just do the housework until she is satisfied? I think so, but my mother-in-law is hardly ever home to begin with. After moving in together, I noticed that she wakes up later than my father-in-law, goes out before noon, and doesn't come home until late at night. At first, I thought she was probably at work, but it seems that is not the case. When I asked my father-in-law, he told me to let her do whatever she wants, and he helps me with my chores. My father-in-law and husband remained on my side even after we started living together. However, the more they took my side, the more my mother-in-law became offended. "You know, no one in this house is on my side. What's wrong with me, a rich woman, picking on this poor little girl? She's a childless, Worthless woman who is only good at night in bed. She must have gotten some kind of disease from some man in the past. That's why she can't have children. Even though I endured everything, I was hurt when she said that to me. The doctor had told me that I was less likely to have children than most women. My husband was so upset by my mother-in-law's vicious words.
Don't be silly, you old bitch!
My husband yelled at her. How dare you talk to me in that tone? Have you forgotten how much you owe me for giving birth to you? In fact, unlike this woman, I was able to have a child. That's why you are here. In response to my mother-in-law's arrogant words, my father-in-law said,
Stop! That's enough!
He intensified his tone. I'm the one who had enough of you. If I hadn't married you, you would be living an old and miserable life by yourself. And I went out of my way to marry you even though I was so popular. Who do you think saved you from dying in solitude? My mother-in-law would argue with each of us in such a precise and malicious manner. Thus, no matter how hard I tried, I could not escape from my mother-in-law's verbal abuse. One day, when I was wondering how long I could endure such a life, my father-in-law complained of poor health, and I accompanied him to the hospital. It turned out that he had terminal cancer. As it turned out, there was nothing more they could do. His life expectancy was 1 year at best. They say he even could die at any time. My father-in-law wanted to receive palliative care at home. He strongly wished to be at home rather than in a hospital, where he would die in solitude. We returned to my parents-in-law's house and held a family meeting. My father-in-law explained his condition, and I added to his explanation. My husband cried tears of grief. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, listens to the story with a terribly bored look on her face. She looks as if she is hoping the meeting will end soon. But right now, I'm not interested in what my mother-in-law is thinking. It is more important that my father-in-law spend as many days as possible, and that I cooperate with my mother-in-law to take care of him. But my mother-in-law's reaction when I told her that was unexpected. No, it was actually expected. Why do I have to take care of him? I definitely don't want to take care of my husband's toileting. What do you think I approved you and my son's marriage for in the first place? It's for times like this, isn't it? It's not like you're going to be taking care of him for years. 1 year at the most. He will pass away soon anyway, so you just have to be patient. My mother-in-law did not stop going out the next day. She even started going out more often than before, and even staying somewhere overnight. My husband had a job too, so I decided to quit my job and devote myself to caring my father-in-law. Although taking care of my father-in-law was a lot of work, it was not hard at all mentally, because I did not dislike my father-in-law, who was very kind to me. But is it okay? I don't know how true it is that my mother-in-law married my father-in-law for his money, but they have spent all this time together. The time he has left is short. Wouldn't she at least try to spend some time with him then? One day, when I was shopping with this thought in mind, my husband had a day off, and he was taking care of my father-in-law.
Thanks for always taking care of my dad. I will take care of him today, so go out and refresh yourself once in a while.
With that being said, I was having tea at a coffee shop after shopping at a nearby shopping mall. Then, I heard a familiar voice from a little distance away. I looked fearfully in the direction and saw my mother-in-law and a young man I have never seen before. I quickly hid behind a wall. I wondered if the reason my mother-in-law had been going out so often was that she was having an affair. While hiding, I listened to the conversation between my mother-in-law and the man. Then, I heard the most unbelievable words. Soon I will be able to live with you. But are you sure? I may indeed be more beautiful than most of the women in my age, but I'm at least 20 years older than you.
It doesn't matter how old you are. I can only see you. I want you to be with me.
That's very sweet of you to say. You know, my husband is dying soon. I'm going to get a big inheritance, and I'm going to give you a big allowance too. It was such a disgusting conversation. She made fun of her husband, calling him old, and yet she was being cheated out of her own money by someone younger than her. As I was getting angry with my mother-in-law, the two of them stood up. I ducked down farther so that my mother-in-law would not find me. Then I saw them leaving the coffee shop, and I decided to follow them out of the shop. Their destination was, as expected, a motel. Her husband is suffering from terminal cancer, and she's with a young man. She called me a bitch or something, but which one of us was it? I wanted to ask her about it, but I need to go home and cook dinner for my husband and father-in-law. Besides, if I got into trouble here, my father-in-law might hear about it. I didn't want to cause more pain to my father-in-law, who was already suffering from an illness. So I decided to capture them entering the motel with my phone camera and to go home. I continued to worry on my way home. If I don't tell my father-in-law about the affair, I might prevent him from being more in pain. But my mother-in-law is obviously counting on my father-in-law's inheritance, and it would end up in the pocket of the person with whom she was having the affair. Can I let this one go so easily? The answer to that question was not going to come in the time it took me to get home. So, while I was caring for my father-in-law, the thought of my mother-in-law's affair kept coming to mind, but I tried to act as normal as possible. However, my father-in-law found out I was out of my mind.
Did something happen?
My father-in-law saw through the hesitation in my heart. I wondered whether I should tell him or not, but I thought that even if I kept quiet, my father-in-law would find out with his sixth sense, so I decided to be honest and tell him what I had seen today. When my father-in-law finished listening to me, he was neither surprised nor angry nor saddened, but simply said, Don't tell me you knew about the affair. When I asked him this, he gave a short reply and started talking about my mother-in-law's affair. According to my father-in-law, this was not the first time she had cheated on him. She had been having relationships with various men and breaking up with them repeatedly for more than 10 years. The reason why my father-in-law knew about it is that he had actually witnessed it and had even investigated it using a professional investigator. However, the evidence of the affair was just an insurance policy, and he had no intention of doing anything with it. My father-in-law had been prepared for some degree of infidelity from the moment his marriage to my mother-in-law, who was 15 years younger than him, was arranged.
No matter how hard I try, I will get older before she does. I knew that one day I will look just like an old man, not a man to my wife. So I overlooked the fact that it was inevitable.
Saying this, my father-in-law fell silent for a while. The next time he opened his mouth, my father-in-law sighed deeply, smiled, and said,
I will take her to hell.
One day, my father-in-law called my mother-in-law to his bedside. At the time, my father-in-law could barely stand up by himself. My mother-in-law came to my father-in-law's side, annoyed, and said, What do you want? I handed my mother-in-law an envelope, as my father-in-law had asked me to do. My mother-in-law took it with a wry smile, and when she peeked inside, her face immediately changed to a smile. Inside the envelope was $2,000 in cash.
I have always been indebted to you. You always take care of me. As a small token of my appreciation, I will book you a room at the luxury hotel that took care of me when I was working. I can't go with you anymore, but you can use the money to spend 3 days and 2 nights with a friend or someone."
My mother-in-law's face lit up. Yes, I was a good wife, wasn't I? You are so thoughtful, aren't you? Okay, I will call my friend and go visit there right away. A few days later, my mother-in-law, not caring about my father-in-law, went to that hotel. With a cheating boyfriend, of course. Later, after returning from the hotel, my mother-in-law put in an unusual amount of incoming calls to my father-in-law and me. I ignored the calls because they would interfere with my father-in-law's care, but they were so loud that I had no choice but to answer them. What the hell is going on? What happened to the house? Where did all my stuff go? Hearing those words, my father-in-law and I looked at each other and laughed. The day after he announced that my mother-in-law was going to hell, my father-in-law began to make various arrangements using his old contacts. He acted quickly and efficiently. It must be true that he used to be a shrewd president. He tried his best even in his bad condition, and tried to avoid wasting the time he had left. My father-in-law first asked to investigate my mother-in-law's affair. At the same time, he contacted a lawyer he knew and started to prepare a notarized will. The contents of the will are said to deny inheritance to my mother-in-law, and only my husband and I will inherit. Both the lawyer and the investigation agent came to our house through my father-in-law's connections. Since my mother-in-law was not home for the affair as usual, she did not notice any bold move to some extent. Proof of the affair and the will.
With those 2 things, you probably wouldn't lose if there was an issue over an inheritance dispute even after I'm gone. The adulterer would not get a penny.
Furthermore, my father-in-law proposed that we move into a condominium that he owns.
I'm going to give up this house with my wife. I don't have many good memories here. Besides, I feel bad that my son and his wife have to live in this old house forever.
Yes, my father-in-law went out of his way to get my mother-in-law to go to a hotel to prepare for this move. My husband and I hurriedly packed up while my mother-in-law was gone and moved into the apartment my father-in-law had prepared for us. By the way, I sent my mother-in-law's belongings to the house of her unfaithful partner. I don't know what will happen to my mother-in-law's partner, because I heard from the investigation that her partner is married and he has a wife. My mother-in-law, who got to know all those things, is speaking unspoken words on the other end of the phone. My father-in-law, who couldn't bear to listen to her, took over the phone and said goodbye to my mother-in-law.
I will never see you again in this world. Thank you for everything. See you in hell.
With that, my father-in-law hung up the phone. Later, according to a rumor, my mother-in-law was charged a large amount of alimony by the wife of the unfaithful partner. We thought my mother-in-law was going to fight over the inheritance rights as my father-in-law predicted, but it seems she was too busy with the alimony payment. So in the end, she lost her house and her savings and lost her way. A year later, my father-in-law died. Although he was initially told that he would only live a year at most, he was able to live for 2 years after being told that. And because my mother-in-law was gone, probably he was no longer under stress. I want my father-in-law to live happily in heaven, because my mother-in-law gave him a hard time. And may my mother-in-law continue to live in a living hell forever.
I earn $8,000 a month from working at home, but my mother-in-law wants me to get out.
My son, who is well paid, and you, who has no job and plays around every day, don't match well. From now on, I will live here with my son. So, you get out of here now. It was a rare day when my husband who usually stays in his room, was out. The intercom rang loudly. When I opened the front door, that was what my mother-in-law said. Huh? In the first place, you should open the front door as soon as the intercom rings. You really are a useless wife who can't do anything. Sorry, I was working and didn't notice. You lied to me like that again. I know. I know that you lie about your job, that you don't do the house chores, that you spend all day long just doing nothing. It's not a lie. It doesn't matter whether you do something or not. My mother-in-law, who doesn't listen to me, smirks and shows me a piece of paper. Do you know what this is? What is it? They are the divorce papers, filled out by my son. He doesn't want you either. Now, sign here and get out of here. My mother-in-law looks down at me triumphantly and laughs. I do as I'm told and sign the divorce papers. My hands trembled as I gripped the pen. My poor mother, so happy with joy. She doesn't know anything about me. My name is Jasmine. I work from home as a freelance writer and editor. Until a few years ago, I worked for a publishing company, and thanks to my experiences from that time, I am still able to earn enough money to live on a steady basis. In addition, when I was working for the publishing company, I worked hard every day, and I had a good amount of savings. Therefore, although I am an unstable freelancer, I am able to live without any major worries. I met my husband Michael when I was working for a publishing company. At the time, I was still a fledgling editor, and Michael was an aspiring writer. I was making a lot of mistakes and things were not going well, but like me, Michael never gave up, even when he couldn't get the result he wanted, and his hard work and dedication to his dream inspired me. I worked hard too, never giving up. So I am the person I am today thanks to Michael. Michael's dedication not only cheered me up, but I found myself attracted to him. A few years after dating Michael, I married him. When I got married, I left the company and became a freelancer. The beginning of our marriage life was going well. I was not yet stable as a freelancer, and Michael was chasing his dream. We encouraged each other and shared half of the house chores and living expenses. After 2 years of marriage, my business began to stabilize. That's when Michael started telling his in-laws that he was a successful writer. In reality, he was not a successful writer at all. Rather, he had been rejected by publishers so many times. Even if he applied for an award, he would only make it to the second round. He probably wanted to reassure his parents, since I was painfully aware of Michael's feelings, that it would worry them to tell them forever that he wanted to be a writer. I said nothing and nodded along with Michael's story at my in-laws' house. In the beginning, all I had to do was nod. By the time his behavior as a successful author was on the board, I couldn't feel at ease at my in-laws' house. Not only did my in-laws believe Michael's story, that he was a successful writer, but they also started calling me a stay-at-home, useless wife. They saw me as a useless wife who was being supported by her husband, a successful writer. To work at home, freelance work style may indeed be difficult to understand and imagine. I don't think it was a way of working that my parents-in-law are familiar with, so I don't blame them. However, my parents-in-law's attitude toward me gradually escalated. Whenever I visited my parents-in-law's house, they would always say, "How could a wife who does neither work nor house chores show up at her husband's house?" As I have told you many times, I am a freelancer, so I work from home. And the sharing of house chores is something that Michael and I discussed when we got married. I don't see how you can talk back to me when you don't even have a job. You say you work at home, but you don't have a good job. You don't make much money, and Michael takes care of you, and and your living expenses. Don't worry. I make a decent living and pay for our living every month. Oh yes, you don't get it. If you don't appreciate Michael a little more and act a little more gracious, I don't know when he'll leave you. If Michael dumps you, you won't be able to make a living. That kind of conversation continued. I almost sighed out loud, but managed to swallow it. I was about to say, I'm the one who earns most of the living expenses, and I'm also the one who does most of the house chores. It's Michael, who doesn't have a job and doesn't do the housework. But I managed to swallow it as well. In the beginning, I only heard various sarcastic comments when Michael was not around. Recently, when I was invited to dinner at my in-laws' house, Michael and I went to my in-laws' house together, and the only meal prepared was for Michael's portion. It has become the norm that there is no seat for me. On top of that, they seem to be talking about me to all our relatives, and even when I attended gatherings with other relatives a few times a year, they only sneak around and talk about me behind my back. I only pity my in-laws' attitude. I was not sad at all, but I was a little frustrated with Michael's attitude of just sitting back and watching and not even trying to stop them. On top of that, my in-laws think Michael is a successful writer, so they keep begging him to buy them things. Michael asked me to buy new furniture or appliances, even if ours are still usable. Michael wanted to make a good impression on his parents, so he bought whatever they asked him to buy. And I found myself spending nearly $2,000 a month on them. Of course, this was all from the money I earned. Michael took money from my account and wallet without my knowledge and gave it to my parents-in-law. I turned blind-eyed when it was a small amount, but when it became too much for me to overlook, I said, "Michael, please don't spend my money without my permission." But Michael just looked at me as if he was annoyed with me. "You work from home and have an easy job, don't you?" "What?" "It's like you're playing around and getting your money with it. You earn money from just playing around, so why not spend a little on my mother? Don't be stingy." "Michael, did you think of my job that way?" "Yes, I think it's an easy job because you get paid by staying at home every day." "I can't believe you thought that about me, Michael." Michael walks into his room, laughing out loud. As I watched his back, I noticed that this was my limit and that I cannot endure more. I will divorce him. I'd always believed that Michael was the one who was on my side, no matter what my in-laws said. So I managed to do my best. But even Michael was making fun of me like this. And I am aware of everything. I know that Michael spends hours a day in his room, but he never writes a single word of his manuscript and spends his days playing computer games. When I first met him, he was more serious about his work than anyone else, and he was eager to write something as interesting as possible. But now I don't see a trace of that. The dedicated Michael I loved is gone. And now all I have is Michael with his in-laws making fun of me. I decided to secretly look for an apartment for a single person. While looking for a new home, I gradually organized my personal belongings and prepared to leave anytime I wanted to. A little while later, I found an apartment that looked good and had already previewed it. One day, my mother-in-law came to our house while Michael was out. She rang the intercom with great enthusiasm, and as soon as the front door was opened, she sat down on a sofa in the living room, as if it were her own. "Jasmine, you get the hell out of this house." "What are you saying out of nowhere? I've been telling you for a long time that you were unemployed and still do not do any of the house chores. You are nothing more than a useless wife. There's no way that Michael, as a successful writer, is compatible with you. So, As I have said many times, you were mistaken about that. Besides, my mother-in-law interrupted me and continued talking. If you leave this house, I will live here. That way, I can cook meals for Michael every day, and I don't have to take care of that woman. That woman? My husband's mother, Michael's grandma. She's so picky about the seasoning when I cook for her, and the dust when I clean. I can't live with her anymore. So I decided to stay here with Michael and have the woman go to a nursing home somewhere. How are you going to pay for a nursing home? I'll just get Michael to pay for a few things like that out of his own money. He's earning a lot of money, so it will be cheap for him. But that's why you are in my way. Will you get the hell out of here? With that, my mother-in-law presented me with filled out divorce papers. Why do you have that? I made him fill out a while ago, telling him to get a divorce from Jasmine as soon as possible. Michael immediately nodded and filled it out. My mother-in-law is smirking and has a nasty smile on her face. I checked the divorce papers and sure enough, they were written in Michael's handwriting. This was actually a good thing for me. I was ready to move out, but I was still thinking about how we were going to get divorced. I thought Michael would not want to give up the life he has now, and he would not sign the divorce papers easily. I was prepared for a long discussion and a battle with him. So how lucky I was to get the divorce papers filled out so easily. My mother-in-law looked a little surprised when I easily received the divorce papers and filled them out. But she soon regained her normal self-possession and said, "Now, get the hell out of here. Leave the furniture behind. Everything gets purchased with Michael's money. So, I don't think you can take anything with you." She laughed out loud. I quickly packed up my belongings and moved into the new apartment. I also filed the divorce papers at the municipal office on my way. Thus, I had a new life on my own without any problems. I was surprised at how comfortable it was to live without anyone interrupting my work and making fun of me. Somehow, I felt that my work was progressing better than usual. It was 3 days after I started living alone. While I was working at home as usual, I received a phone call from Michael. I picked up the phone, and the first thing he said was, "Please come home," he said in the most pathetic voice I have ever heard. "What the hell is wrong with you now?" "I'm sorry, I apologize. So please come back home." "I'm not coming home. We have already divorced." "I never agreed to divorce. That's not valid." "But those divorce papers were definitely in your handwriting." "That was just a little threat I was trying to make to you. I had no intention of getting a divorce." "But that doesn't change the fact that you wrote them. Divorce is divorce. You don't need a wife who plays around every day, works on an easy job, and doesn't do any of the house chores, right? You get to live with your family you love so much. You can't complain. What's the problem?" "I'm sorry, but my family thinks I'm a writer, so they quit their job and moved here, intending to live on my dime. On top of that, they want me to pay for grandma's surgery, and there's no way I have that kind of money." "I see. That's why you want me to come back." "Yes, and now that they know I've been lying to them. My mom and dad are really mad at me. They're all clamoring for me to bring you back right now. You now know how hard it is for me. Please come back to me. Let's live together again." "Do you really think I'm going to say, 'Yes, I'll come back'? I've told you many times, we're divorced. You have to take care of your problems." "Don't be like that, Jasmine." No matter how many times I say no, Michael won't give up and hang on to me. I don't know how many times I told Michael that I was a stranger to him now, that we were divorced, and he got irritated. "All right, I'll divorce you if you insist so much. But you know what? If you divorce me, you should pay for my parents' care and alimony, which you were supposed to take care of when we were married. What are you talking nonsense? Because, if you hadn't divorced me, my mom and dad would have ended up in a facility, and we would have had to pay for their care. So you should be the one to pay for it. And since you divorced me on your own, they found out that I lied about being a successful writer. And my mom and dad got mad at me and hurt me emotionally. All of this is because of your selfish divorce. I can't pay alimony. No, I won't pay that because I don't understand what you mean. In the first place, when we were married, it was you who said I was a jobless, no good wife. I don't know if it was out of your pride or not, but you were the one who lied about me and hurt me. Your parents and our relatives believed your lie, and they accused me. I don't want to say this, but I was much more hurt than you are hurt now. I'm not interested in you, who willingly made fun of me instead of protecting me. If you want money, why don't you just borrow it from a bank or anywhere else? With those words, I hung up the phone without hearing Michael's reply. I set my phone to block his calls and changed my phone number. A few months later, I happened to pass by my in-laws' house, which had already been sold and turned into a parking lot without a trace of my in-laws' house. While I was looking at my in-laws' house, a neighbor who happened to be coming back from shopping approached me. She told me that Michael's family had no choice but to move into an old apartment because they were all unemployed and had run out of money. Before they got out of there, they had been fighting every day. They were famous in the neighborhood because it was loud enough to be heard outside. And they were annoyed by the noise until late every day. The neighbors even called the police. She patted me on the shoulder and said, "You had a tough time too," and hurried off. I also turned my back on my former in-laws. Michael started to lie to look cool, and then he couldn't correct his lie. And the gap between the truth and the lie grew bigger and bigger as he continued lying. I never thought it would end like this, but it's a much more interesting turn of events than the novels Michael writes. It is so common for small happening to lead to a terrible end. But I wonder if Michael, who wanted to be a writer, couldn't have imagined it. Fact is stranger than fiction. I feel a little sorry for him, that he ruined himself by lying to his parents for his glory and self-satisfaction. But I am going to learn from him, so that I don't end up like him.
It's only natural that a wife should spend Christmas with her husband's family.
My husband was trying to pin me down with old-fashioned logic. When he realized I wouldn't accept what he was saying, he began to ignore me. I won't take this anymore. If you want to spend the holidays with your family so much, I'll give you the chance to do so. Don't waste your time telling me that you regret it later. By then, it'll be too late. My name is Michaela. I'm 38 years old and love bulk grocery stores. They're a savior considering the way prices are shooting up these days. Thanks to them, my freezer is always filled to the brim. When I was young, I would just buy whatever was cheapest at the grocery store. But now, I'm running a household and buying from a bulk grocery store. I feel like I've gotten better at life. I guess I can say I've grown up. In my 20s, I married George, who at the time was a colleague of mine and quit my job. He was always reliable at work, and I thought that I could build a wonderful family with him. When it came time for our first Christmas as a married couple, my husband said,
"We just got married, so I want to stay over at my parents' house for a while. I was thinking we could go around the 23rd and stay until a few days after New Year's."
Huh? I also wanted us to visit my family around the holidays. And if we stay at your parents' that long, we won't be able to.
Can't you visit your family after the holidays?
I can't because after the holidays I'll start my part-time job.
My parents were looking forward to seeing you too.
George held his head in his hands, looking concerned. And I also began to mull things over. I was very happy that his parents were looking forward to seeing me. I've heard stories about people being shunned by their in-laws, and I can't say I really feel like a part of the family yet. My in-laws always seem to have their guard up when I meet them, and I haven't had any personal conversations with them yet. So, I've been wanting to get closer with them. I discussed this with my parents, and they told me that since I married into my husband's family, I should prioritize my in-laws. They even told me that a wife can't just skip back to her parents' house anytime she wants. Having heard that from my parents, I told George that we should go and have as much fun as possible at his parents' house this Christmas. That made him happy, and I was relieved. But from then on, nearly 5 years passed without me being able to visit my family. George kept on coming up with excuses to keep me from going. The first year we were married, he used the fact that we were newlyweds and said we should spend time with his family as a couple, and I accepted that. I went along with it partly because of what he said, and also partly because I thought it was important for me as his wife to demonstrate that I value his family. My parents told me that I can come home anytime I want, so I should prioritize spending the holidays with my in-laws. At the time, I decided that that's just what getting married is. So, we didn't just spend Christmas, but also Thanksgiving and 4th of July with my in-laws. George's parents seemed really happy. They became accustomed to me and treated me like a real member of the family. But then, during the second year of our marriage, we weren't newlyweds anymore. I had just gotten pregnant, and I wanted to meet my family at least once before giving birth. So, I told George that I wanted to spend this 4th of July with my family instead of his.
Why would you go to your parents' house? It's the 4th of July.
My parents live relatively far away, so unless it's a long weekend like this, I can't go out and visit them. They're getting older, and I want to meet with them while I still can.
You can meet them anytime you want, so isn't a phone call enough for the 4th of July? My parents are also getting older. Don't you want to spend the 4th of July with them?
We spent every holiday with them last year. On 4th of July, we both have the long weekend off, so we can each go to our own parents' homes.
That's inconsiderate. My family will feel like you're abandoning them.
Why do you want me to spend the holidays with your family so badly?
Why are you trying to avoid meeting my family? Do you not want to see them?
I'm not avoiding them, and I never said I don't want to see them. That's not the situation at all.
That's exactly what it is.
This wasn't getting anywhere. My husband and I just can't see eye to eye when it comes to our parents. It all started after I called my family to tell them I'm pregnant. He got angry, and that I didn't call his parents first, and it became a big fight. I told him that I wanted to wait until things were more certain first. Though honestly, I can't deny that I also wanted to hear my parents react happily to the news. I didn't think it would be the start of an argument between us. Since then, George keeps assuming that I don't prioritize his parents because I hate them.
My parents have been so nice to you. What could you possibly be dissatisfied with them about?
George's parents really did treat me well, and I loved them. That's the truth. But of course, I also loved my own family, and my parents weren't going to be around forever. I want to spend time with them while I still can. But at this point, George just saw me as the wife who hates her in-laws. That year, George's father passed away slightly before Thanksgiving. So of course, we spent Thanksgiving with his mother. The next month, George said we can't leave his mother alone for the Christmas holidays, so I wasn't able to see my family that entire holiday season either. My mother-in-law was deeply shaken by her husband's passing. Imagining her watching Christmas movies or the New Year's countdown on her own made my heart ache, so I readily agreed to go. I genuinely wanted to keep her company.
This year, you want to go to my mom's for the holidays for the first time, huh? What are you trying to pull?
What am I trying to pull? George probably said that as a joke, without giving it too much thought. But even if that was his idea of a joke, I didn't like it. From then on, his attitude towards me became more and more indifferent, to the point he didn't feel like my husband anymore. By then, 5 years had passed since we first got married. We had our first child, and George really began thinking lightly of me. He probably thought that at this point I couldn't run away, no matter what he did. We used to follow the rule that whoever got home first would handle the chores that day, but he seemed to go out of his way to come home from work late. It was obvious he just didn't want to help around the house. If I made even the slightest of mistakes, he would immediately complain, saying things like,
You really are useless.
I felt like I was at work with a strict boss watching over me. I could feel how my husband's personality change was gradually making me more and more stressed. Some time passed, and my younger sister got in touch to tell me that she had given birth to her first child. My first niece. She was staying over at our parents' house because she had given birth at the hospital nearby. Christmas was coming up, and I realized I hadn't met any of my family in years.
You want to go back to your parents' house for Christmas because your sister gave birth? Isn't a phone call enough if you want to congratulate her?
What? It's not just to congratulate her. My husband continued, telling me to just call instead, and I couldn't hide my irritation with him anymore. Why won't you let me go spend time with my family? You always like to say that I can go whenever I want, but when I actually try to discuss my plans, you never follow your word.
It's only natural that a wife should spend Christmas with her husband's family. A wife can't just skip back to her parents' house anytime she wants. That's what your parents said, isn't it?
They said that to be considerate. I haven't gone back home in so long that my parents are obviously feeling upset. I want our daughter to finally meet her grandparents, too.
That's what it means to marry into a family. What do you have against my family? Remember how real women used to be. They were more devoted to their husbands' families. I've been considerate to you so far by not having us move in with my mom, though I wanted us to. So you should be more considerate to my mom and I too.
What kind of historical ideas of the ideal family was he referencing? I didn't even know George wanted us to live with his mother. I've always felt like I was biting my tongue and letting George do what he wanted, but from his perspective, he just considered me a problematic wife. Instead of talking things through with me, he just eventually explodes and forces his opinion on me. And since I don't follow along, he sees me as a useless wife. How am I supposed to know you wanted that if you've never told me?
It's your fault for not being able to understand without me having to spell everything out for you. Women are supposed to follow their husband's wishes.
No woman would ever agree to something like that. You should have married a robot if that's what you wanted.
That's your biggest issue right there. You never try to fix any of your faults. I don't care anymore. I'm not going to speak to you until you finally learn your lesson.
Excuse me? George, completely out of line, went into his bedroom and ignored me for days afterwards. How are we supposed to resolve things if he won't even talk to me? I increasingly began to wonder why I was married to this guy. Of course, the reason I carried on with our marriage until now is because even if he made me angry, I didn't completely hate him. I thought that our sweet relationship from when we were dating was just experiencing a bit of a hiccup since we got married. I believed that as long as we still loved each other, we could go back to what we were before. I did my best to fix things. Though, that love seemed to have disappeared. Ugh, how stupid. I can't take this anymore. After giving it some thought, I suggested to our daughter, Sienna, that we go on a trip. She firmly nodded in agreement, and though she probably didn't know what was going on, that was the push I needed. I took Sienna, and we secretly moved away. Half a month passed. Our doorbell rang early in the morning, and looking outside of the peephole, I saw George standing outside. When I opened the door, he lunged in and hugged me.
I've reached my limit. Mom, help me.
When he pulled away and noticed it was me, George stared wide-eyed.
Michaela? Huh? What are you doing here?
Michaela moved in with me, my mother-in-law said with a smile, walking up from behind me.
What?
George exclaimed in a wild voice. Christmas is coming up, so it's only natural for a wife to be at her husband's family's house, isn't it? That's why I got in touch with your mother and moved in.
Wait, what's going on? Didn't you leave behind a letter saying that you're leaving me?
My mother-in-law and I grinned as George stood stunned. I'm the one who should be asking you what's going on, George. Michaela, I heard you didn't let her visit her family even once.
Didn't you say that you wanted to see Michaela?
That's because you would always say that you and Michaela wanted to come visit. If she wants to visit her family, you should obviously let her. Where's your gratitude to her parents for letting her marry you? The shrill, strict scolding from his mother made George stiffen up. And what did you mean earlier when you said you want help? I hope you weren't about to say that you can't handle your housework on your own now that Michaela left you. Hearing his mother's words, George looked down at the ground pitifully. Well, that was to be expected. The clothes he was wearing were in shambles. I'm not sure whether it's because they weren't washed or because they weren't folded well, or maybe he didn't dry them properly. Pathetic! You acted so high and mighty with your wife, but you can't do anything without her. George let out a "but" that hung in the air awkwardly.
Michaela couldn't survive on her own, so she had to come leech off of our family, so same goes to her. Don't just pin all the blame on me.
He let a self-satisfied and I felt something inside me snap. Excuse me? You're the one who said a wife should spend Christmas with her husband's family. Shouldn't you compliment me for being a good wife that follows her husband's wishes? Aren't you embarrassed that you need me to take care of you at your age? You kept telling me that I am useless and that I am not perceptive enough to understand you, but you didn't know I was leaving, did you? You can't even take care of yourself. Aren't you the useless one? This was the first time I bared my fangs at George. He stood shocked with his jaw dropped and his face went pale. He probably wanted to reply to me, but no words were coming out. I did all I could to do as you say and be a good wife, but in return all you did was ignore me for days on end.
That was a mistake.
Ignoring me meant that you'll accept anything I decide to do from here on, right?
Huh?
George suddenly snapped into focus. It's your fault for refusing to talk to me. At that point, you lost. I'm divorcing you.
Wait a minute. You know what things are like at my job. If I get a divorce after having a child, everyone will think I'm unreliable.
Well, that's the truth. You aren't reliable.
You really aren't.
My mother-in-law chimed in and cackled. Hearing his mother's comment, George went silent. The reason I turned on your mother is because I love her like my own mother. Though I tried telling you I treasured your parents and considered them my own family, you would never listen to me.
You're bad at expressing your feelings.
Yeah, in that case, this is for the best. Since I'm obviously unable to express my feelings to you, I'm going to divorce you. Having his words come back at him like a boomerang, George stood there dejected. George's mother chased him away, and from then on, continued to let Sienna and I live with her until the divorce proceedings were completed. Negotiating a settlement was difficult. George first tried to claim custody of Sienna. Then he said he wanted us to get together again. He wouldn't accept getting a divorce. He cried on his hands and knees, sent romantic letters, and tried just about anything he could. If he didn't want a divorce, he should have treated me better in the first place. No matter how much he regrets it, it's too late now. I'm not familiar with divorce law, and didn't expect the process to be this much of a hassle, so it was very difficult at first. I genuinely thought we might not be able to get divorced if he doesn't agree to it. At one point, he threatened he wouldn't pay child support, and I genuinely panicked because I didn't know that was protected by law. My sister helped me find a good lawyer, so ultimately everything wrapped up well. It seems there are much more complicated divorces than ours. It really was a learning experience. I was also able to win custody of Sienna with no problem. Though it took time, Sienna and I were finally free. Sienna got to meet my family more, and she seems happier now than before. I heard from an ex-colleague that George became so stressed from the divorce that he became useless at work and makes mistakes daily. One mistake resulted in losing an important client, so the company suffered a big loss. Because of that, George's boss's salary was reduced, and George was also demoted. His teammates, who were all punished alongside him, all began to hate him, and his reputation in the company suffered. Less experienced colleagues got ahead of him in the ranks, and everyone talks about George behind his back. As Sienna's grandmother, George's mother meets Sienna every once in a while behind George's back. Sienna seems to really love her grandmother. Last summer, they went to many carnivals together, and her grandmother bought her a lot of cotton candy. Her grandmother spoils Sienna more than I do, so Sienna says she likes her grandmother more than me. What can I do? I'm her mom. I need to be strict sometimes. Though Sienna says things like that, when I once caught a cold, she stayed by my bedside all day taking care of me. The bond between a mother and her daughter really is deep. Sienna loves my parents a lot and definitely wants to visit her grandparents during long holidays. She also seems to have fun playing with her cousin. In general, she's an interesting child who would choose going to her grandparents' house over even going to Disneyland. Maybe she really does love her grandparents more than me. I'm getting a bit worried. But during the last parent day at her school, Sienna said the person she loves the most is her mommy, and I won't forget that. I will do my best so I continue to be the person she loves the most. For Sienna's birthday this year, I've decided I'll make her favorite chocolate tart.